Dr. Dale Rogers, an eminent professor of supply chain management at the University of Nevada, gives us his opinion about supply chain management.
Well, every time you move inventory, there's a cost to that. And so as much as possible, you want to have the fewest inventory movements that you can. And it's much more cost effective to move information related to that inventory than it is to the inventory itself. So the best possible solution is where you can keep the stuff in as flexible form as possible, maybe not in raw material form, but in a form of a component or set of components. And then when the order comes in, you can put that stuff together, assemble it, configure to order, and then move it quickly to where the consumer or final customer is. And you always want to trade information for inventory and inventory movements if you can. So it makes a lot of sense to make sure that stuff that's likely to be poor quality, you don't want that moved forward in the supply chain. That doesn't make any sense at all. You can think about three flows. You can think about financial flows, money moving back and forth. You can think about the actual product flows. And then the third flow is information flow. And financial flows are already pretty automated and move quickly. And information flows are obviously of those the least expensive. They're the most cost effective. So if you're going to really need to move one of those three flows, the one that you really want to optimize is the information flow. You really have to see problems actually before they happen. You have to be able to see that capacity at your supplier's plant in China is going to be disrupted because of some event. You really have to see it not just as it happens, but even before it happens. And so whatever tools give you the capability to have visibility as quickly as you can and as far back in the supply chain as you can, that's critical. If you have visibility into inventories wherever they are, you're going to be able to make better decisions. You know, it's very difficult to forecast accurately. Sometimes you can forecast sales dollars, but that's not the same thing as how many blue size 11 shoes we need in Reno, Nevada or Vancouver, Canada. Those are harder decisions, and it's harder to forecast the amounts of product you need specifically. So if you have visibility into what's available in the supply chain, you're able to shorten your decision time frame. You're able to forecast shorter periods as opposed to farther out. Because if you have to move the product and position it well before the demand shows up, then you're going to have more inventory problems. So if you can have visibility into what's available the whole way, you can forecast a shorter time frame, and you know, we're more likely to know what we're doing in 5 minutes than in 5 months. If you think about all of the companies that have gone out of business because of bad inventory management, and there's lots of them. I mean, you think about the sporting goods industry just as an example, and you know, the Miami Dolphins used to play in Pro Player Stadium. Pro Player's gone. You know, Converse went bankrupt, and they were the #1 athletic shoe company in the world for a while. Certainly dominated the basketball side, and now they're a division of Nike and coming back. But what they really didn't know how to do was manage inventory. And managing inventory is really all about the management of the information from the original source all the way through to the end consumer. And so really the companies that are effective at managing the information are the ones that are winning today. I would say that cash flow is the key, and if you can spend less of your cash on bad inventory, you're much better. In fact, you can really dramatically improve your profitability by taking cash out of inventory. That's one of the best, one of the easiest ways to improve your profitability. Well, as much as possible, it'd be nice to have visibility. We call it tiers. So several tiers of the supply chain. So like, for instance, General Motors, just to use an example, is going to buy stuff from Lear Siegler and Dana Corporation, and in turn Dana and Lear are going to buy components from other factories and other suppliers. And it's nice to see problems and also see supply chain possibilities as far back in the supply chain as possible. So it's nice to have visibility into Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. And most companies, it's hard for them to do that today. It's very difficulty, and it's really about the information management tools. That's why it's difficult, I think. Well, the trading company typically restricts visibility back in the supply chain, so it makes it harder to anticipate problems in the supply chain where there's a capacity issue, or the guy couldn't get the fabric to sew the shirts, or sometimes they do restrict the information, and their preference is sometimes to not let you see past them. Now, if you're doing what you should do as the firm that owns the brand, you're going to try to manage behind the trading company. But that's harder to do if you're a medium or small company. If you're, Nike, you probably can do that, or Logitech, or a big electronics company. But if you're somebody kind of starting out, it's harder. But think about the retail sector in the United States. And, Walmart came out of nowhere in the 60s and is by far and away the largest company. I mean, way bigger. $300 billion in revenues this past year about. And that's huge. And many of the other retailers have had real serious problems. They're competitors. I mean, there's some good competitors out there in their sector, but there's not a lot of them. Well, how have they done so well? Is it because of those really clever commercials with that bouncing smiley face knocking down prices? I don't think so. I'm not saying those are bad commercials, but that's not why they're so good. A big part of their success has been the strength of their logistics and their supply chain management, and their ability to link supply to demand better than anybody else, to have the efficient, effective movement of product forward to the consumer, the ability to reduce stockouts. They have a lower stockout rate than most companies do. And because they're better with managing the information around the inventory, typically you can have a lower cost, which translates into higher margins, which translates into more money to be able to invest and grow the chain. So if you look at where competition really is these days with a lot of firms, it's around the supply chain and making that flow of product in the direction of the consumer move quicker and move less expensively. And so mostly you do that. Mostly you take cost out by managing the information more effectively, which allows you to take inventory out, which reduces costs, and sort of a circle. I think having visibility and knowing what's going on in your supply chain is really the key. And that sounds so simple, but yet it's so hard to do. There's a lot of business reasons why it's hard to do. What happens is any company and its supply base and its customers, as those relationships mature over time, what typically happens is the supply chain becomes more complex. And I think that's almost true in every situation you can think of. So there's more complexity, and there's a lot of reasons that makes it more difficult to have visibility into what's happening back in the supply chain. So I think the key is knowing what's going on. And then after you know, then you can manage it better. I think that's the key to success, truthfully.